So we we took a quite detailed look at the Zhuo Zhengyuan, and I hope that that analysis help you to to make up some strategy about how to look at Chinese garden, and what aspect to pay attention to. So so for the rest of this private garden lecture, I'm going to show you more quickly, but look at some other gardens, and I will point to some special thing that might not be touched upon when we were looking at the Zhuo Zhengyuan. But other than that, I hope you can see what you need to see when I'm showing you this slide. So this is a plan of another garden, another private garden. It's called the Liu Yuan, which means can be translated as the lingering garden. So the title of these gardens are quite interesting too. So here is the title of the garden give you a lot of space for imagination. So the title in Chinese even does not say anything definitive. So there are many different ways of interpreting the title, the name. So lingering garden. What is lingering? Lingering for what? So that's pretty open to each individual. So that's one aspect I wanted to point out too. So the plan, I hope you can see the garden plan. It's organic shape, water body, etc. And it is also a attachment to a residence. So the house is located to the south of the garden. This is a section drawing of the lingering garden, the so-called water and a mountain. All right. So you can see the water are no more than a shallow pool of water, and the so-called mountain. Look at how big that mountain is compared to the house. So it's a miniature, right? Garden is to create a miniature landscape. It relies a lot on imagination, right? So this is the entrance, and I hope you remember everything about the entrance, right? About the entrance. What is the function? What is the purpose of the entrance? And what is the characteristic of the entrance? And after entrance like that, and now you have what is in the central open space in front of the main gathering hall. So here we are looking at that direction. So that is the in order to enter this space, you need to go through that narrow corridor and appear here. So that we are looking at that direction. So that is the entrance space. And after that wall, and suddenly you are in front of that central lake. Just a different angle, somewhere here. looking at that direction, looking at the same building. Pavilion, right? And elevated on a place where you should go and take a look. Smaller courtyard, that one here in this courtyard. This is a very famous rock, and so the appreciation of rocks had a long history. And in the Chinese garden, these rocks are called the peaks and the mountains because you are meant to imagine a full-size mountain by looking at these rocks. They did allow that kind of imagination because of the shape and the holes and the richness of the texture and shapes. These were from the bottom of Lake Tai, where these rocks were washed by the waves and penetrated with holes and made into these kind of very organic shape. Excuse me. And the inside of the building, the characteristic of garden building, its openness, its brightness, and its kind of tamed color as well. The walls, right, avoiding straight line, creating these what is called the cloud wall, which makes the outline of the wall work better with the natural environment better. So another garden, this one called the Wang Shiyuan, Garden of the Master of Fishnet, right? Master of Fishnet, that's fisherman. So the title suggests the hermetic idealization of a kind of a bucolic life. This one is a smaller. This garden is way smaller than Liu Yuan and Zhuo Zhengyuan, the previous two. You can tell that by looking at the size of the residence. So this is the residential part. And then the garden kind of attached to its northwestern section, and kind of a studio space in those garden. And here we have the residential compound. So this one I also will show you some picture of the residential part. The residential part is characterized by axiality. So this is the main entrance. The first courtyard. And kind of more courtyards located here. So those courtyards are very small. Sometimes the space between the two buildings are tiny. And kind of richly carved. These are brick, but carved with the features of wooden structure. And yeah, just still in the residential part. And then the entrance from the residential part to the garden. So that is from here. You can see there's a small opening right here. And that is a connection to the garden. And you can see that kind of dark and small space. You pass that small entrance and find yourself still in a quite confined space. But if you follow that corridor, there you have that corridor just attached to that wall. There is a corridor right there. If you follow that, you find yourself in front of the central lake, right? And the meandering corridor. So you find yourself in front of this central space, and it's not big at all, but after that contrast, you do appreciate that kind of generous space compared to something like that. And the arrangement of buildings is balanced but not symmetrical, right? See that smaller pavilion but elevated on a higher ground, and that bigger building but lower, all right? You have something small but tall, and then you have something that is big but low. So that created a balance, but without using exact symmetry, right? So this is quite different from, say, the Forbidden City, which is more confusion in philosophy and ideology. And there we find exact symmetry. Notice also how that the roof of that corridor is combined with the wall, right? Right? So notice that space in between that allows some light to cast down and illuminate part of the wall under the roof, right? So those are all deliberate design. And notice also those windows opened on the wall, right? So from which you can see the other side of the garden. This is that direction. So you are standing here looking at that direction. That is that corridor right there, and that is the location of the pavilion, and that is the main gathering hall. Main gathering hall, the pavilion, and the corridor connecting them, right? So another corner and small bridge that kind of divide the space without obstructing the view. So here we are looking at that little bridge. The scale of the bridge helped to make that water seems bigger. So if you look at the side of the bridge, that is very, very low. That is only about a foot. So it's a miniature. So if you imagine some kind of balustrade in the normal scale for a bridge, then you would imagine that bridge as something bigger. And as a result, that water is also, can be imagined bigger. So from this standpoint, the water kind of curved away from that corner, hiding the source of the water, and give you a chance to imagine that this water body belonged to a bigger water surface. And that is also helpful for, for kind of expanding, for the expansion of the imaginary space. Another courtyard, right? So those courtyards, the scholars' rocks are everywhere, kind of replacing, substituting the rigid walls, and also helped to break down the scale. This one is not in Suzhou, right? But in a city nearby Suzhou, called the city of Wuxi, very close to Suzhou, also in the Lake Tai area. And this is the Jichang Garden. The Jichang Garden, I'm just showing you the garden part. There is a residential part, residential part as well. Which is located to the south and east part of this garden. So I'm showing you this one because this garden is, when the 18th century Manchu emperor Qianlong visited the city of Wuxi, he stayed in this garden. And after he returned to Beijing, he ordered a copy of this garden in his imperial garden in the Summer Palace. So I wanted to mention that because we will start looking at the imperial garden, and you will see a copy of this garden in the imperial garden. So here, we are looking at that direction. And in the distant mountain, there is a pagoda. And that pagoda is incorporated into the courtyard. Right? So you see those buildings on the left side of the lake, and bridges and wall on the other side, but that distant view was not meant to be blocked. That is called the borrowed view. Right? So that's something you should be reminded when you are looking at a scene like this in a Chinese garden. Right? So the view borrowing, which rely on kind of experiential on-site design. And this is the opposite direction, and looking at the opposite direction. Oh, I think I did the opposite. So this is looking that direction, and so this one is looking at the opposite direction, and so that hill should be in that area, but much farther away than what I draw here. Some detail of the Jichang garden. This is still on the water half. So as you can see, it has a water half and it has a mountain half. Right, one half is primarily water, another half is primarily kind of a mountain, and of course both are kind of miniature. So we are still on the water side. The bank of the water, right? And this is the a path among those rocks. So those hills were created by piling up the earth dug from the creation of the water surface, and then surfaced by those rocks. So you pile up the dirt and then you put the rocks on top of the earth hill, and thus created this kind of a rocky mountain surface. And in this case, the passage was created like a valley. And again, you know, the size is not that big at all, because you can tell by comparing to a normal size room. So there are these buildings, and this is a pavilion. So that is pretty small, a passage. But it gives you a feeling of being in the wild nature, not only because of the what you are seeing, but also what you are hearing. So there are, you know, water directed to cascade down from up the hill, and so the sound of the spring and the sound of those cascades can be heard and you know, echoed from those surfaces. So while walking through this passage, one hear the sound of water. So it's called the musical valley, and because the richness in sound when you know, pass through this passage. So by this aspect, I wanted to highlight that, you know, the garden design, and indeed architectural design in general is not just a matter of vision. So a comprehensive design should take into consideration all different senses. You know, the acoustic, the odor, and the smell, and the visual elements as well. So it should be comprehensive, experiential. So, you know, if you follow that valley, you find yourself, you know, appearing at the bank of the same lake. So that also helped to kind of enrich the experience of that lake. So the lake disappear from your vision for a moment, and you feel you are passing through a mountain valley, and then the lake reappear in your vision. And that also helped to expand the imagined space of this lake because of the richness of spatial experience in the traveling within the garden. So there, that passage, branch out to one direction into another group of building with their own courtyard and their own water surfaces. So if you look at those small courtyard, you notice there are smaller water surfaces within that courtyard. There's just that tiny little pond. And there as well, there's another water surface. So, so yes, this water surface is not that big at all, but then there are even smaller one. So that also create contrast. So when you visit those small kind of water surface and then come back to this one, its scale can be better appreciated. So back to the same lake and looking at the other side. A pavilion. And so that is here. That the building type is known as jian, and it's called the 知鱼剑. That is literally, the pavilion for knowing the fishes, So that is referring to a famous Taoist story about one of the great master of Taoism living in the 4th century BCE. One day he was, taking a walk with his friend, and he said, how happy the fishes are swimming in the water. And then his friend asked him, how do you know the fishes are happy? You are not fish. You are not a fish. How do you know the fishes are happy? And then, he responded, you are not me. How do you know that I don't know the fishes are happy? So that was a very famous kind of Taoist story, and it just goes back and forth, having that kind of Socratic exchange of argument. And it is built into the Taoist philosophy about, the interconnectedness of everything, human, fish, nature, everything are connected. And also in terms of the relationship between objectivity and subjectivity in that argument. So that the name of that building certainly refer back to that Taoist story. The building of the pavilion, the knowing fish pavilion, right? 知鱼剑, which is the name of that building. And this is a major building on the northeastern side. It's courtyard. Now, I want to also show you some of the kind of a public these are not imperial garden. These are like public scenery area in some of the southern cities. And the reason why I'm showing you this is also because some of these famous sceneries were copied by the emperor in their imperial garden. So we will start looking at the imperial garden, and so I wanted to show you this so it will make more sense for you when we start looking at imperial garden. So the West Lake area in the city of Hangzhou, well, it has real, obviously, real lake and a real mountain. Now this is the real nature, right? So, you know, compared to this, those water are really nothing, really nothing. But you know, the garden designer helped, you know, us to imagine some kind of wild nature like that, right? So when you are looking at that, a small pool of water, you were meant to experience something like that. And that is the standard for successful private garden design. So these scenery areas in those southern cities are inspiration for both private garden as well as for imperial garden. So imperial garden sometimes deliberately copy these famous scenery areas like the West Lake in the city of Hangzhou. Enormous lake, and their buildings are also much bigger than those buildings in the private garden, but the size of the buildings seems small in front of this true nature. So here, the mountains, and that is a pagoda, right? You can see the real size for a real mountain, and there a boat that seems tiny, while the size of that boat might be the size of the entire lake in a private garden. So that's the sense of scale. That just you know, at least it make me just appreciate those tiny, small private garden more, because you realize how small they are. But when you are inside of them, you have a sense of, you know, being in a large, spacious, wild environment, and that is the whole point of those private garden. So this is another scenery area in the city of Yangzhou. There we have the so-called the Lin West Lake. There's also a lake area, but it's instead of a large kind of a circular lake in Yangzhou, that West Lake is a narrow kind of a stripe of water. It's called the Lin West Lake, 瘦西湖. But even this kind of a elongated lake, its width is still quite considerable. It's still pretty wide, right? And so it's real water, real lake surfaces. So here we have those roofed bridges. That is one of the most favorite subject in large scale garden, in imperial garden or public scenery park. And there we have those bridge kind of roofed by those pavilions, and that are also copied quite often in Chinese garden design, in those large size public park. And a Buddhist pagoda, and in this case, it is a Tibetan style Buddhist pagoda on one side that is within the within a Buddhist monastery. Some strategy that is used in private garden as well, like using the pavilion window as a picture frame. And in this case, you know, the pavilion is much bigger than those in the private garden, but you know, the strategy is pretty much the same. So here we have these circular moon gate, so-called moon gate, and you can frame the public area, right? So you see that roofed bridge in one circle, and that, you know, Tibetan Buddhist pagoda in another circle. So at different angle, you frame the surrounding area differently and get diversified. It's kind of a live painting you have using those windows to acquire those painting in life and changing perspective. Just another angle of that bridge. So again, consider the size of this bridge and the bridge in the previous private garden. So those small bridges are probably, you know, not bigger than a rock that is in this picture, right? So their size are tiny, and compared to these kind of gardens. And again, that just to make me appreciate those small gardens more, because when standing in front of those tiny little bridges, you don't have a feeling of such big difference in scale. And that is a successful design, right? Just combination of these pictures, reflections, that is part of the scenery design. So you have to take into consideration those reflections of surrounding buildings, and just like the borrowed view. So when you have something that is raised high, you know, its location and its relationship to the water body needs to be considered. So for these large scale park, that on-site experiential kind of design process is still the key for success. Now this is another city and another scenery area, and this is in the city of Jiaxing, which is very close to Shanghai. And this is the South Lake of Jiaxing. And here I wanted to show you the South Lake. There's a building, and that building is called the Tower of Misty Rain, right? So the Tower of Misty Rain. And it is a very famous building. So I'm showing you this. You know, the building and is famous mostly because of its kind of historical reputation and those literature that has been describing this building and this area. So in terms of architecture, I think it is not that special at all. It's quite common, a building. And the lake was beautiful, but in terms of design, I think it is not an outstanding design, but it is famous. So I'm showing you here also because Qianlong Emperor in the 18th century copied this building And this area in his imperial garden, in the imperial garden in the city of Chengde. So I want to show you this in the province, and later those imperial garden, their scale and their ideology was to collect everything that is beautiful into the backyard of the emperor. And the backyard of the emperor is, so big that it can include the full-size mountain and full-size lake, right? So this the same building, the Tower of Misty Rain in the city of Jiaxing, and so surrounded by water body and by the vast lake just in front of it. I wanted to just very briefly, now I'm going to be really brief for this so-called northern style, and that is referred to private garden, but located in northern city like Beijing and Shandong province, etc. So they are private, but a lot of them belong to imperial princes. So they are like miniature royal garden, and they have greater sense of axiality compared to the Jiangnan style. So we are not going to look at these garden in greater detail. And then the so-called Lingnan style garden refer to the garden in the Guangzhou area, the city of Guangzhou, also known as Canton, which is close to Shanghai. I'm sorry, close to Hong Kong. The Cantonese area. So there, the garden, the city of Guangzhou had more contact with foreign trade. So during the Ming and the Qing dynasty, the city of Guangzhou was the only trading port doing business with Westerners and people from the Persian and Arabic world. So they were exposed to foreign influence. So in the Lingnan Garden, in the which means south of the Five Range. So there's a mountain range located to the north of the Guangdong province, where the city of Guangzhou is located at the capital of that province. And so Lingnan style, south of the range style, refer to the garden in that area. So there are more kind of a combination of Eastern and Western architecture. And they also frequently use a water body that remind us Western garden. So in this case, there's a water body that is in geometric shape, although it is combined with a Chinese pavilion, but that kind of geometry give us a strong feeling of those kind of Western geometric garden. And the entrance, right? So the Cantonese style house, and a lot of carving on the ridge. So an arch, right? So you notice that kind of Western style in combination with a Chinese kind of a scenery, but created in relief. And that's the kind of geometric water pool, moon gate, and a building walled with glasses. So I think that's pretty much what I want to show in this private garden. The last are just a few very beautiful pictures from those private garden that we have. Some of them we have looked at before. So the garden, I think the last point I want to make is, garden design does not have something to do with space, but also not only about is a design of not only space, but also time, because you need to consider the change of season and to make sure that the sceneries in the garden are beautiful in different seasons of the year, right? Bright interiors and zigzagging corridors. So in winter and the same place in spring, right? So this is, I hope you still remember, this is the boat-shaped building in the Zhuozhengyuan Garden of Unsuccessful Politician. In winter, and the same place, the boat-shaped building in spring, when the willow tree is just sprouting, and the peach blossom just comes out, and the tree was without leaves. So that kind of color combination and the same place in winter gives you very different feeling. So garden design takes the change of time into consideration, and trees and flowers need to be planted accordingly. So the experience of garden is also an experience of the vicissitude of nature, life, and history as well, because the full appreciation of garden always rely on one's knowledge about history and the cultural context. Okay. All right, thank you. So I think we finished this lecture, and we can move on to the Imperial Garden.